that maybe other people are labeling as anger. Hurt is certainly one of those. I have no trouble saying I get hurt. So one thing that maybe we can do is we can admit that we're hurt, even as we acknowledge that our suffering might not be gratuitous. That's one of our bullets, right? Maybe there's a reason, an overarching reason. Maybe not, but maybe, right? And even if there's a maybe, that's something to feel not so bad about. And we can empathize, we can exercise intellectual empathy even when it's hard. I like what you said, Diane, even when it's hard, even when someone hurts us and it stings like fury, we can try to think, why did that person act the way they do? And we can admit that we're frustrated. I think frustration is a really underutilized term to describe what people are saying. I think often when people say they're mad, they're actually frustrated. And even as we acknowledge that people are frustrated, it might just be mistaken. That's Socratic, right? Maybe they're just mistaken. And we can understand that it can be hard for people to change their minds, but what that means is we can do everything we can to share what we know with them. It's important to tell our stories, especially now when people might not understand what we do for a living and they might say things about us, like we're lazy and we don't work hard enough and we're educated idiots and things that could genuinely hurt our feelings, right? We can try to empathize with people who say that and tell the stories that we have and learn from the stories that other people have and acknowledge that sometimes people are just going to disagree and that's hard to understand. But just because it's hard to understand doesn't mean it's anything to get emotionally upset about. It's a logical problem. It's a genuine logical paradox, I think. And I think that if we do all of these things, which by the way, I suspect you already know, and I suspect you already do. And if I've said anything here that has given you anything that you didn't have when you walked in the room, it might be, I hope, a framework that can help you to understand what you already know, and that can help you to sort of empower yourself to continue to do what you already do. And it has to start somewhere. And I really can't think of anyone better than us to start it. And I think that's why I'm so proud to be here. I'm really proud to be here. I'm proud not only to be here standing in this room talking to you. I'm proud to be at this institution. I'm proud to have the students that I do. And I'm proud to have the colleagues that I do. And honestly, this often happens. People will tell me, your students are so smart, and your colleagues are so smart. And I can tell them, as I often do, yes, and they're nice, and that's more important. All done. I have 10 minutes for questions. Not that I think you would have any.
I actually have some questions, so I'm going to, those who don't know me, I'm a psychologist, so I've had a lot of things in my head as you were talking, but, what did the Stoics say? I mean, you talked about external pain. What about internal pain?
Well, they're mostly talking.
They're mostly talking about that? And do the Indian philosophers, do they say you can try to avoid getting angry at the person who is using the anger, or can you get angry at the words? Is it like avoid getting angry at the angry person or the words?
Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure what it would mean to get angry at the words.
So get angry at the fact that they're saying these things, but not necessarily the messenger.
I don't know. I'm very, very far from being an expert in Indian philosophy. I'm definitely just a dilettante there. But from what I do know, what little I know, I suspect that it's at the person who speaks, because anger at words would be more like frustration at a situation. But I honestly think that at the extreme, Indian philosophy would say not even that, because it's ultimate detachment from all things. Honestly, sometimes when I tend to worry a lot about what people think about me, a lot, more than I should. And sometimes when I'm upset, when I'm worried that people are upset with me or mad at me, the only thing that has ever helped me ever to feel better is to think, but I'm not upset with them. I'm not mad at them. And for some reason, I don't know why, that makes me feel better. Because I can't make people not mad at me, and I can't know for sure if they are. But if I don't like assign blame, it's almost like there's sort of a knot that just gets released. And I think it's probably has to do with sign of evil intent. Yeah, Diana the judge.
Oh, it's sort of like not accepting behavior.
Yeah.
Or not liking the behavior as opposed to.
Right, exactly. And to understand that there's probably reasons for that behavior. I mean, seemed like a good idea at the time, probably. Everything that I've done that I think was stupid now seemed like a good idea at the time, or I wouldn't have done it. Yeah. Josh?
Does simulation theory assume that you can always put yourself in somebody else's position?
Well, I think to the extent that we can explain them, it does. There might be some people whose behavior is just utterly incomprehensible to me.
Yeah.
And to the extent that I understand it, I really have to think of them as a bug, right? I have to see them. I have to understand their behavior in exactly the same way that I would understand, insectile fixed action patterns. Right? Not as a human being. So I would explain them. I think so. Yeah. Why?
I used to have a professor, when we would read Cornell West, he would say, the old adage that you just imagine what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes is complete poppycock, because you can never imagine what it's like to be in certain other people's shoes.
No, that's right. You can't. Although.
So, I mean, this might explain some of the cognitive dissonance that.
I think so. But even then, like when people say, and that's an excellent example. People from a very different, place in society than I am, say, you can't possibly understand what it's like to be me. How do I understand when they say that? I think, that's right. There's lots of things about my own experience that I can't expect other people to understand unless they've had that particular experience. Ergo, I can't so in a way, I apply meta simulation theory to understand why I can't understand. I can't understand them for the same reason that they can't understand certain things about me.
In adolescent development, we call it personal fable. And it's adolescent egocentrism. And it's an overemphasis on self-consciousness and thinking about thinking. And
Right.
so.
Right. Yeah. Which, if you never get over, you become a philosopher.
Or a psychologist. Who's a practicing philosopher.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure. I like simulation theory for lots of reasons. I'm not up on all the recent literature, and I actually used it as a way to reconcile a certain problem in the philosophy of language and psychological explanation. That given the way we ascribe in natural language mental states to each other, and the way in which those ascriptions are sensitive to features of the environment, there's an inevitable lack of fit between brain states and common sense mental descriptions like beliefs. There's an inevitable lack of fit, which means that if we have to appeal to something like brain states or if that's the way to go, then our normal explanation of each other that appeal to things like, George is hungry, don't work. So what I appeal to simulation theory as a way to have another explanation of explanation that could allow attributions like that to do causal work. I do think that it conforms to my own introspective assessment of how I think I explain behavior.
Going back to what you said about agreeing to disagree being a dangerous situation, can you explain that more?
Yeah. Well, I think it's dangerous for a few reasons. I think sometimes it's a way of opting out of difficult conversations, and that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you should opt out of difficult conversations because the alternative is worse. But I also think that it can make it seem too easy, as if there's no tension there. And so, I suppose that my neighbor thinks that my life, and this is not the case, thankfully, but suppose my neighbor thinks that that philosophy is just not an important endeavor in the world, and there should be no philosophy professors or no philosophy classes. And I try to explain to my neighbor that this is not right, and we have many conversations over a period of years, and neither of us budge. To say, oh, well, we'll just agree to disagree, the easiness of that, I think, can paper over the difficulty of the experience and make it as if, in a way, it kind of makes it appears to make the disagreement go away. Because fundamentally, we agree. We agree to disagree. So can't we all just sort of hold hands and sing Kumbaya and everything's fine? And there's still this, and also the challenge is still there. Because in a way, I'm still challenged by my neighbor. Because if I've shared everything that I have to share with my neighbor, and my neighbor still thinks that my profession is worthless, and if I still respect my neighbor, how do I think about my profession?
And just the comment about epistemic peers.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that with these. You've taught me something about epistemic
Yeah,
peers.
an epistemic peer is exactly someone that you think, epistemic again has to do with the theory of knowledge. So an epistemic peer is someone who you think is as able as you are to attain knowledge in a certain area.
From the data given, right?
From the data given. So knows the same facts that you know, and is as able to reason from those facts as you are. So if I think that my neighbor is an epistemic peer and my neighbor thinks that my life is a farce, I'd better be worried.
Mm-hmm.
I either have to downgrade my neighbor as an epistemic peer, or I have to reconsider my, my choice of profession or something. Okay. Well, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you for showing up.